Let's create a simple project using the architectural template and the default wall from level 1 to level 2. We'll just use a rectangle tool to draw these walls using the basic 8-inch generic wall. And then we'll put a door in that space and a couple of basic windows just to analyze two different scenarios with the energy analysis. We'll need to have a floor, so I'll use the floor tool to create here a floor that goes from out to out. As long as we have floors, walls, and roof, we have an enclosed space that we can use the energy analysis with in Revit now. So I'm creating a roof now. I'll put an overhang of 1 foot and just keep the check mark and define slope so that we can have this hip roof on all sides. And so if I go to the 3D view now, you'll see that it's just a basic shell and could be more complex, but we want the energy analysis to go quickly. Now I'm going to save this one. Navigate to the folder you want to save it in and name it your last name base project, because we're going to modify the project and then compare the two energy analysis. So put your last name in there, base project 1, and then pick save. So now we have this basic model that uses the defaults. We'll go save it as another different project that I called your last name modified project 2. I'm selecting all the walls. By resting my pointer on one of the walls and picking tab, it will select all of them, and then clicks, and picking edit type, picking duplicate, and then creating here a wall type that's called thermal properties. And then if I pick the edit button under structure, I can then insert another layer that would add the insulation. So I'm going to insert another layer and then change the function of that layer to thermal air layer, and then I can change the material. You can select EFIS exterior insulation and you can see that there's a thermal tab that's at the top right, or rigid insulation. There are several different types of insulation that have thermal properties, and you can even change some of the properties in that tab. So I'll pick rigid insulation, and now I have to adjust the thickness for my 2 layers here. The structure was 8 inches and the insulation would be whatever you'd like to make it. 4 inches, 6 inches, and it can be that fiberglass batt insulation as long as it has thermal properties. There are several underneath the Autodesk physical asset folder in materials, and so we'll do the same thing for the roof. In the first original basic model, we kept everything as defaults, and this one we're adding a lot of thermal properties to the material. So for the roof, we'll do the same thing. We'll insert another layer and pick up a type of insulation that we can use. And now we'll change the material of the floor so that it at least has some kind of dense material like bamboo flooring, something different than the generic flooring. So we'll change just the material here. I right-clicked on the default material and created a new one, renamed it My Floor, and then picked the asset browser at the bottom left and went to flooring in the Autodesk physical assets and found the bamboo flooring, which actually gives it kind of a dense material under properties. Now we can open the 2 drawings side by side in the 3D views by closing all the views and opening up the first one again. And then you could use WT for window tile and then ZA for zoom all to look at both of them. They look similar, but they have different thermal properties. So now we're ready. We're going to keep the same location, although the location does establish the weather station and weather properties for that area. You could change the glass for the windows, but once you look at the analysis, you'll be able to determine whether you need to work with stronger thermal properties for that glazing. So in the base project 1, which actually has your last name, base project 1, we can go to the Analyze tab, and at the far right side, because we're using building elements and not conceptual elements, we can pick energy settings. And like I said, we'll keep all of the defaults, but you could change the building type and the location so that you had a more specific location which would pick up the weather around that area. And we'll also change the export category to spaces. It could be rooms or spaces, but we didn't add any rooms. And later, when we work with mechanical systems, we'll be using room spaces for our analysis. We can then run the energy simulation. These dialog boxes will appear talking to you about when the process is complete. You can pick OK. And now we're creating a new analysis that can be exported as a PDF or a GBXML file, and several others that we'll take a look at. So running the energy simulation, you can pick result and compare and see that it's actually running and processing. And it just takes a few minutes because this is a smaller project. It might take anywhere from 5 minutes to an hour, but we're still not using or logged into the Autodesk 360 or A360 using the green building analysis yet. This is all within Revit, and it creates this file that gives you several parameters or factors about your building performance. Before we look at that analysis for the first project, let's create one for the second project, and then we can compare it. So click inside the project 2 and go to Run Energy Simulation and go through the same process here, picking OK, and then using the default names, pick Continue, and let that one run through the analysis so that we can compare the two. Under Results and Compare, holding your Control key down, you can select both those project energy analysis and then files, and then pick Compare. And now they're side by side, Project 1 and Project 2. So as you scroll down, you can see the big savings that you're creating just by adding those thermal properties. If you look at some of the total life cycle energy costs, you'll see that the second project is a lot less, and even the annual carbon emissions is lower, or actually in the negative. So you'll see the percentages of each one of these that we've created in Revit 2014. Now 2015 and some of the beta software is adding more to it and analyzing each one of the objects. As new presentations are created for courses in the future, these will be updated and available. to you. With both of them selected, we won't be able to go into the Green Building Studio. But under settings, there are all these check marks of the different specific things that you might want to include in your analysis before you run it under settings. But we're going to go back, and you can also export your analysis as a PDF file so that you can post it as part of the assignment and have it for your information. Make sure that your name is in that analysis file. I would highly recommend, if you haven't done it already, to go to the Autodesk website and sign in. Once you sign in, you'll have access to the educational community, to the A360, which is a web-based way to share and access and upload your design files, and the Green Building Studio, which gives you even more information about your energy analysis. Also, in the Autodesk website, you can download software for a 3-year free subscription. So if you haven't already, I would suggest that you create an account and just give Autodesk just the basic information, your name, your email address, and you're creating your own Autodesk ID and password. So you have to remember or write down which email address you use, the ID that you created, and your password. And once you submit this information, Autodesk will send you a link that will bring you back to the website to sign in. There are discussion groups and free downloads and so many other tools, beta software that they're experimenting with. So I'm going to sign in and show you the Green Building Studio information so that if you decide to, for your future projects, you'll be able to access that advanced information. Going back to the results and compare, I can open the Green Building Studio now that I'm signed in, or the design review, and look at this extended information, which includes water usage and access to more detailed information. Notice here that there is information about daylighting and wind energy potentials, and as we start to work with mechanical systems and daylighting analysis, we'll be coming back to that. So for this assignment, go through what we just did as an experimental way of looking at and comparing these two reports, one without the thermal properties and the other one with the thermal properties added to the model. Export the energy analysis compare report with your name in the file as a PDF so that that's one file that can be posted, and then open another project of your own, whether it is the first project that we worked with in this course or one that you've worked with in a different class, and change the energy settings so that you can establish a location and some of the settings that we used, and then run the energy simulation and export it as a PDF so that you can submit both the compared report and the new one that you'll create with a somewhat bigger model with additional spaces. They will all be different and have different results. If you decide to experiment with creating a mass you can go to the Massing and Site tab and create an in-place mass, and then select that in-place mass and create mass floors. Then, as an option, instead of using here the building elements, you can use the conceptual mass mode. Change the energy settings so that you can use spaces, and now you can see that you have access to the conceptual constructions. If you pick edit, you can decide on some basic constructions for your mass and even put a check mark in here. Glazing is shaded and the shaded depth. Once you run the analysis, and this is optional, you'll see that for that mass project, it's very similar to the building element reports. As we start to look at mechanical and structural systems, we'll come back to the Analyze tab and use some of these other tools. In the Revit file, before we exported GBXML, we need to turn on the volume computations. So in the Architecture tab, where you see the room and area tools, you can click on this arrow at the bottom of that panel and pick area and volume computations, and then put a check mark under areas and volumes, and then pick OK. Now we can go to the top left application menu and pick Export GBXML, and then we can change the export category to rooms, make sure there's a check mark and include thermal properties, and in the details panel, pick in front of analytical surfaces. So here we have this colorful representation of the different surfaces. You can even use the shift key with the wheel of the mouse to orbit around this model and change the display here at the bottom left to shaded. If there are any warnings, you'll see them in this panel. We do have a warning here for this room because I don't have a ceiling. So there's this kind of open space here between this, what would be the ceiling and the roof. So it might not be exact in the calculations. We can pick next and create here the XML for this Revit file. If you wanted to save it so that later on you can go back into Green Building Studio and select that file. And because it's an extensible markup language, it can be used in several other building performance and analysis software. Ecotech Analysis was my favorite for creating several building performance graphics, and picked up several of the tools that Green Building Studio didn't. It included several of these colorful graphics that are now becoming a part of the Revit 14, 15, and 16 programs. Here on the Autodesk website, effective March 20th of this year, 2015, new licenses for Ecotech Analysis will no longer be available, and the reason is that they're integrating these functions into the Revit products. Ecotech Analysis did even more than Vasari, which is similar now to Revit. So they're really pulling all of these tools into the out-of-the-box Revit software, making it easier for us to use them all in one. From what I've seen so far in 2014 And the newer tools in 15 and 16, we are able to analyze the model right within Revit. When you're signed in on the Autodesk website, you can do a search for programs, and it looks like there are two of them here with the structural analysis and the lighting analysis being the two that are student and available to you. And the energy analysis is a part of what's being brought into Revit